Hello and welcome to our YouTube channel. What does this data say? I'm Ajay Prakash. In today's episode, we explore a rarely discussed chapter of India's freedom struggle, a chapter shaped not only by great leaders like Gandhi, Nehru, and Patel, but also by their silences. Silences that allowed a very different political force to rise, the ideology of Hindu nationalism and the organizations that embodied it, the Hindu Mahasabha and later the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, the RSS. Today, secular parties like the Congress and the Samajwadi Party routinely respond to Hindutva themed speeches in parliament, whether by Modi, Amit Shah, Rajnath Singh, or other BJP leaders, with visible disdain, walkouts, and strong verbal objections. To them, these speeches represent a deviation from the plural constitutional idea of India. Yet, what many of these parties fail to recognize is that the ideological landscape they are protesting today did not suddenly appear in 2014. Its foundations were laid nearly 125 years ago during the early 20th century churn of nationalism, communal politics, and organizational vacuum. And in that historical arc, Congress itself played a part through its silences, its compromises, and its inability to confront rising identity based mobilizations. In many ways, the rise of the BJP is not an abrupt rupture, but the long germinating outcome of seeds sown across decades, some by its ideological predecessors and some inadvertently by the Congress itself. To understand the rise of Hindu nationalism, we must begin in 1905 when Lord Curzon partitioned Bengal into two provinces, East Bengal with a Muslim majority and West Bengal with a Hindu majority. Officially, it was an administrative reform, but Indians knew better. It was a classic British tactic, divide and rule, and the effects were explosive. For the first time, India witnessed a mass emotionally charged nationalist movement, the Swadeshi movement, the boycott of British goods, and a new kind of political awakening swept Bengal. But something else also happened. The Hindu middle class, the Bhadralok, interpreted the partition as a direct attack on Hindu cultural space. Muslims in East Bengal, meanwhile, welcomed the new province as recognition of their distinct identity. The result? A new rift, a new imagination of political identity, one that increasingly saw the national question through religious lenses. The ground was being prepared for Hindu nationalism long before the RSS or the Hindu Mahasabha even entered mainstream politics. When the partition was reversed in 1911 under Lord Hardinge, Hindus celebrated it as a victory, but Muslims felt betrayed. The communal divide deepened. The soil was fertile, the ideas were taking shape. Amid this churning, one leader saw the future more clearly than others. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the intellectual giant of the early Congress, the mentor of the servants of India society, believed that India needed a new kind of leadership, disciplined, moral, and capable of mass appeal. During his visit to South Africa in 1912, he found exactly that person. A young lawyer named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who had just led the first experiments in satyagraha among Indian immigrants. Gokhale immediately understood Gandhi's potential. He urged him to return to India, telling him, India needs you, but observe India for a year before you take any political step. And so Gandhi returned in January 1915, not as the Mahatma we know today, but as a student of India, a learner, someone trying to understand a country he had been away from for almost 21 years. And what Gandhi found was a nation fractured. Moderates and extremists were there within the Congress. Hindu Muslim divides were deepening, and the British were exploiting these divisions masterfully. Gandhi entered this world softly with ashrams, spinning wheels, social reform, but the political storm was about to escalate. Parallel to the Congress politics, another ideological current was rising. The Hindu Mahasabha, founded in 1915, emerged as a response to two major anxieties among sections of Hindus. Firstly, the rise of pan Islamic politics, especially during the Khilafat movement. And second, the fear that Congress was appeasing minorities, compromising Hindu interests for the sake of unity. The Mopla rebellion of 1921, with the brutal killings and forced conversions of Hindus in Malabar, further intensified these sentiments. Many Hindus felt that the Congress had failed to acknowledge their suffering. Gandhi's insistence on supporting Khilafat confused and angered the moderate Hindus. Meanwhile, V.D. Savarkar, writing from the Andamans and later Ratnagiri, articulated the idea of Hindutva in 1923, an idea that imagined India as a Hindu Rashtra where cultural unity, not merely political freedom, defined the nation. At this time, Congress was the dominant political force, but it could not fully accommodate Hindu anxieties, minority insecurities, and internal ideological differences. This vacuum created the perfect conditions in which an alternative Hindu political identity could grow. Sardar Patel did not raise direct warnings with Nehru about the RSS before 1947, largely because in that period the organization was still small, regionally confined, and not viewed as a political threat within the larger freedom struggle. Congress leaders were consumed by far larger crises, the Muslim League's rising separatism, the communal tensions across provinces, constitutional negotiations with the British, and the internal struggle to keep the national movement united. For both Patel and Nehru, the overriding priority was securing independence, not policing ideological groups that were at that time peripheral to the national politics. It was only after the partition violence and Gandhi's assassination that Patel recognized the scale of the challenge, and only then did RSS related correspondence between him and Nehru become explicit. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, many Hindus, especially the middle class, urban, and caste Hindu groups, grew disillusioned with the Congress for three reasons. Firstly, Gandhi's insistence on Hindu Muslim unity at all costs. Gandhi believed unity was essential for freedom, but many Hindus believed that he was blind to the rise of communal politics among Muslim elites. Events like the Mopla violence reinforced these fears. Second, Congress's refusal to build a disciplined cadre base. Congress was a mass movement, not a cadre organization. It lacked structure, discipline, and ideological training. In contrast, organizations like the Arya Samaj and the Mahasabha worked systematically at the grassroots. This lack of organizational capacity would become critical in the 1930s. In provinces like Sindh and Bengal, Hindu businesses communities feared Congress's pro-peasant reforms. They saw alternatives, even alliances with Muslim League factions, as safer than Congress ministries. By the early 30s, Congress was the biggest party but not the only voice of nationalism. The Hindu Mahasabha and the emerging Hindu youth organizations were beginning to offer a competing narrative. One man in Nagpur sensed this vacuum clearly. His name was Keshav Baliram Hegdewar. On 27 September 1925, Hegdewar founded the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh in Nagpur. Why 1925? Because the political environment had reached a tipping point. Hegdewar had seen the failure of the non cooperation movement, the Mopla violence, the chaos of the Hindu Muslim political equations, the absence of any disciplined Hindu organization, and the need for cultural, not just political, mobilization. The RSS was designed deliberately as a cultural organization, not a political party, a cadre based system, not a mass movement, a discipline first institution where physical training and ideological messaging was central to its mission. And its mission was simple: to unite Hindu society from within, build character, discipline, and a sense of Hindu identity. In contrast to Congress's spiritual moralism and the Mahasabha's political rhetoric, RSS focused on long term grassroots psychological transformation. Gandhi, Nehru, and Patel understood its growing influence, but they rarely spoke about it publicly. Its growth was slow, quiet, but steady. The 1937 elections became a critical turning point. The Government of India Act of 1935 led to provincial elections in 1937, the first major test of Indian democracy. Congress swept 8 out of the 11 provinces. But in Bengal, Sindh, and Northwest Frontier Province, something unusual happened. The Congress refused to form coalitions, insisting it would only govern where it had a clear majority. That created openings for others. In Bengal, the Krishak Praja Party and the Muslim League formed a government with Hindu Mahasabha support. In Sindh, fragile Muslim coalitions formed governments, again supported by influential Hindu groups who feared Congress's economic reform. And in the Northwest Frontier Province, although Congress performed well, the British governor maneuvered against it, and the Mahasabha did not support a Congress led government. So the big question arises: why did the Congress remain silent as the Hindu Mahasabha supported Muslim League governments? There are five key reasons for this silence: political, strategic, and ideological. Firstly, Congress needed the Mahasabha support in other provinces. In UP and central provinces, Mahasabha legislators often voted with the Congress. A public confrontation would destabilize Congress ministries. Nehru and Patel preferred stability over ideological confrontation. Secondly, the Congress refused coalition politics. This high moral position was politically naive. Where Congress lacked majority, others formed governments. If Mahasabha supported those governments, Congress could not object without contradicting itself. Third, internal divisions within the Congress. Nehru was increasingly socialist. Patel represented conservative Hindu interests within the Congress. Gandhi remained morally above day to day politics. Opposing the Mahasabha publicly would have exposed Congress's own internal fractures. Fourth, Gandhi dismissed provincial politics as petty. He refused to be dragged into coalition dynamics. His focus was on village reconstruction and national unity. He did not want Congress labeled as anti Hindu or anti religious. And fifth, Nehru feared that attacking the Mahasabha would further polarize India. Nehru believed the Muslim League was already drifting towards separatism. A public fight with the Mahasabha might push Hindu forces to polarize further. So he kept quiet, hoping the storm would pass. In reality, that silence allowed Hindu nationalism to grow deeper roots. Between 1925 and 1940, the RSS expanded quietly. Between 1915 and 1937, the Mahasabha positioned itself as a defender of Hindu interests, and Congress, the only party with national reach, offered no ideological counterattack. By the late 1930s, Hindu nationalism had three pillars: an ideological text, Savarkar's Hindutva; a political party, the Hindu Mahasabha; a cultural organization, the RSS. In contrast, the Congress was morally divided, strategically unprepared, organizationally weak, dependent on individual charisma rather than institutions. British policies only deepened the divide: separate electorates, communal award, divide and rule administration. So, what does this tell us? From the partition of Bengal in 1905 to the 1937 elections, the rise of Hindu nationalism was not sudden reaction to partition or the Congress Muslim League rivalry of the 1940s. It began much earlier. It grew because Hindu anxieties were real and largely went unaddressed. Congress avoided ideological battles it should have fought. The Mahasabha provided political articulation, the RSS provided organizational discipline, and the top leadership of Congress, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, chose silence over confrontation. The silence wasn't malicious, it was strategic and in some ways idealistic. But politics rarely rewards silence. The Hindu nationalist movement grew quietly, steadily, and confidently in the spaces Congress left unguarded to fill a psychological vacuum, not just a political one. It offered identity, discipline, purpose, and cultural assertion, things Congress never fully addressed. Today, the legacy of that silence shapes India's political landscape more powerfully than ever. Thank you for watching this episode of What Does This Data Say? If you found this exploration insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you in the next episode. I am Ajay Prakash.